Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting of Belleville City Council. Today's date is Monday, August 26, 2019. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Pam, if you could call the roll.
Mr. Edwards.
Here.
Mr. Greenwood.
Here.
Mr. McGill.
Here.
Mrs. Middlestetter. Here. Mrs. Seeger Lawson. Here. Mayor Schweller.
Here. Next item is the approval of the regular and special meeting minutes of August the 12th, 2019. Does anyone have on council any changes or corrections?
None there.
Seeing none, the minutes are approved as written. Next on the agenda is mayor's announcements. A couple things to talk about before we get into our guests. First off, we just had a very busy weekend in Velbrook this past weekend with the Velbrook Summerfest, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And as far as I know, things went off without a hitch. I know we had the parade on Saturday. I was asked to judge the car show Saturday night, which is kind of interesting. They have an award for the mayor's trophy, which is one car out of 110. So kind of a tough selection process. I could get it down to 5 or 6, but one made it very difficult. We also, I think in the parade, it was Daryl, myself, and Forrest participated in that. And then we had a farmer's market Saturday morning, so we had just a lot of things going on in Velbrook, and I think everything went off without a hitch. Okay. Tonight we've got actually 3 special guests, but the first one is one of the more important aspects of my job, and that is administering the oath of office. We've got our newest councilman, Dr. David Van Veldhuizen. At this time, I'd like to ask him to come forth for the oath of office. Make me stand over here so they see me. Okay, repeat after me. I, Dr. David Van Veldhuizen,
I, Dr. David Van Veldhuizen,
solemnly swear I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
solemnly swear I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
will obey the laws thereof.
will obey the laws thereof.
I swear to,
I swear to,
in all respects,
in all respects,
uphold and enforce
uphold and enforce
the provisions of the Charter
the provisions of the Charter
and the ordinances of Velbrook,
and the ordinances of Belleville,
and faithfully discharge the duties of the office
and faithfully discharge the duties of the office
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This is just on the top line. Good. Here, your pen. Okay. As David is a sworn councilman, I invite you to participate in tonight's meeting as a councilman and take a seat at council. As I said, last week we interviewed 9 people. It was a long process. We talked to a lot of people, saw a lot of energized people. We're very happy with Dr. David Van Veldhuizen, and we're very pleased that he was able to accept our offer and nomination. Next on tonight's agenda is Mr. Tony Calley. Tony is our citizen, resident, business volunteer to head up the revitalization organization. Welcome to council, Tony.
Thank you. Okay, well, good evening, everybody. I'm going to read a little statement I put together just to make sure I don't miss anything. And I'm not much of a reader, so I apologize about that. But this is follow-up from the hiring of Jeff Siegler and the revitalization attention brought to Velbrook. So I'd like to share there's been a positive response and a lot of community group support for an effort in an organization that we're putting together. The group is not formally named at this time, but an executive committee has been selected, and we begin meeting regularly in September. The intention is formalizing the community organization as a focal point for the community, a collective and positive way to channel our area's momentum. The group's anticipated to operate as a hub, collecting ideas, talent, volunteers, and aiding small group efforts going forward. Some efforts are likely to fit the revitalization thoughts, while others are likely focused on maintaining the historic charm of Bellbrook. I should highlight that the group has yet to clarify all the details, but is anticipated to support the downtown, Sugar Creek, and general Bellbrook area. Here's a basic timeline or outline. In August, the committee's been formed. That's happened. September through November, the committee's going to work through strategic processes, creating the name, focus, mission, purpose, and structure, along with an organizational database to approach. The idea is to capture people of interest with their skills, their interest, and use that to create the small groups as projects launch. In December, I'm going to step out of the committee chair position and allow the committee to nominate a committee chair going forward into next year. And then in January 20, the program starts. My goal is to have 2 projects underway in February. The intentional efforts have been made to ensure representation from all the different areas. We've got the committee members made of both residences, businesses, property owners. And I've listed the executive committee below. I could probably read their names off. But we look forward to bringing ideas to the City Hall meetings, to have support from the City Hall. I anticipate a blend of projects and complexities, meaning that some will be underway and just announced, while others are going to certainly be looking for prior approval. To me, success will be defined as a group with community support, able to identify projects, funding is needed, volunteers, and positive energy, with the ability to bring requests to the City Hall in a focused, streamlined approach, helping each other with clear and focused cooperation. So at this point, the executive committee of this group is me as the committee chair, secretary is Melissa Jones, treasurer is Christina Pearson, and then 4 committee members, Brian Coe, Pam Cook, Pete Wickstrig, and Jen Brock. So I printed a few extra copies of this. I don't know if anybody wants to see it. So that's the basic announcement. I'm welcome to answer any questions if there's any. Just wanted to make sure the word got out.
First off, Tony, I want to thank you for serving. You're not a resident of the community, but you're certainly a vital interest with a business in town, and I understand you stepped up right away, and I think that's just fantastic. I know Tony from outside the city of Bellbrook briefly, and I can tell you from what I do know, he's a very aspiring and hard-charging entrepreneur, and I think that's what we need for this role, so thank you for serving.
Thanks, you're welcome. It was easy to step in when I saw all the support from the area that's behind the whole thing, so glad to. And
Are you gonna have set meeting dates and the public, can the public watch the meetings or have input to the meetings or how?
watching the meetings, I don't have the technology for that at this
Okay.
point, but yeah, September 10th is the first meeting that we're gonna get together as a 7.
Okay.
And then we're gonna meet Thursdays through September, October, November, a couple holidays to work around. And in those details, I didn't know that I wanted to decide all of that on my own at this point, so I'll be working close with Melissa some as we have changes to update, and that's a great question. We want to make it very public and aware. I think there's even an idea of hosting some kind of follow-up group for the community to help share an outline of here's the actual name of the group and the purpose and the mission, where we can state and quote some of those.
Okay, great.
Good. Thank you. Sounds good.
Any other questions from council, feedback?
Hi, Tony.
Yes, sir.
I've met you a few times. You're spot on. You're doing a great job. The meetings, are they going to be a specific place, or we have a particular website you're going to make announcements on so the public can kind of get interested if they want to?
You know, we have a local IT support person in the community that's been active on the For Bellbrook by Bellbrook group that meets on Fridays. And we had a slight conversation about some software that we could do multiple things. Post and show the conversations, the minutes of our meetings, direction it's headed, and at the same time tie in a database. So as all of us, I mean, everyone around here is community members. So where we could go in, we can log in, we can list, here's my skill sets. You know, maybe somebody does great with gardening. So as a gardening project comes up, we'll find all the gardeners and create a group. So yeah, we plan on that being very public, very easy to get their hands on. There's also some communication or some thoughts of trying to create and use this database towards all the other, there's a lot of good service projects or community groups in the area, one that was brought up to me tonight, I hadn't thought of for a while, was Bark. There's a very strong ham radio group in the
Yes.
area, so
Oh,
why
that's very
not
good.
tie that into here and help show, is that community calendar idea fair to share? And maybe have a single calendar point where all the different activities can be shared at one spot. So I mean, if it goes to that level and we can get the support for that, it'd be fantastic.
So basically, you may be looking for volunteers with all skill sets.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I use my wife as an example all the time, and this is being filmed, I'm sorry. honey. She's an artist, she's a good artist. If I asked her to come out to a monthly meeting, there's no way she would come out to a monthly meeting for a group to hear chatter about things. But if there's a focal point of a project that catches her interest in her creativity, she's more prone to go to those meetings and go to those activities and help something happen. So I really hope this group of 7 is organizing and having hundreds of names and all kinds of small projects go in all the different directions.
Sure, build the skills bank and a jobs jar. So you
Yeah.
can get to.
Yeah. So,
Anything
yeah,
else,
this
Council?
part was the easy part. It's all the volunteers will be the piece that we really
Yeah.
appreciate.
Anything else?
Good luck,
No,
and
good
we
luck.
do
Sounds good.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah,
We
you're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks to volunteers,
Thank you.
committee chair too.
I'll be giving some more updates on the road.
Thank you, look forward to it. Next on the agenda is Nikki Cousins, Ashley Puchowski, and Janelle Terrell, high school cheerleader request.
Yes,
We've heard this one before, but go ahead.
we have. My name's Ashley Pachowski. I'm here to represent on behalf of Bellbrook High School Cheer to request permission to decorate the town next Wednesday for our game. And of course, at the end of the season, we would take all the decorations down. We'll avoid, I think, as previously requested, any stop signs, light posts, things like that, I believe, or correct me, of any other things that the cheerleaders should avoid as we do decorate.
The only thing is, I used to represent DPNL and I no longer do, so you probably ought to at least ask somebody at DPNL. I don't know if is there a DPNL representative out there?
Kyle's back there.
Yep,
Kyle's
okay,
back
you can
there.
probably talk to him maybe.
Okay, great. All right,
Our big concern is just put them up and take them down.
we will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Next on the agenda is the public hearing of ordinances, of which there are none tonight, followed by introduction of ordinances, of which we have none tonight either. Resolutions, the first one, Resolution 2019-X, Mr. Greenwood.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, here we go. City of Bellbrook, resolution number 2019-X. A resolution designated a kindness of all around symbol as an official symbol of kindness. Whereas there is a symbol for peace, love, and happiness, and a need in our schools, communities, nation, and world for more kindness. And whereas the Tropical Kingdom from Tropical Elementary School in Merritt Island, Florida, believes that helping others become aware of kindness will generate more kindness. And whereas the Tropical Kingdom determined that having a symbol for kindness would help make people more aware of kindness in their everyday lives and held a vote to choose a kindness symbol. And whereas 983 people from 25 states as well as England and Ireland voted with 52% choosing the kindness all-around symbol as the official symbol of kindness. Now therefore that the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, that the kindness all-around symbol become the official symbol of kindness in the city of Bellbrook. Section 2, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith. I read the minutes late, and I had seen the symbol on the building, and I thought we had a tiger. Not to be disrespectful, but I didn't expect to see it, but it looks good. Do you have any history behind this other than that?
Actually, I'm going to give a quick preface, and then I'm going to let a community member that brought it to my attention speak on this. So last Thursday, Elizabeth Davis had scheduled a meeting with me to talk about kindness, and so I was all ears. And so she came in and she told me about this movement that's been created by this kindergarten class in Florida. And so I was really interested in it, and I said, let's do whatever we can to support and promote this. So I'll let Elizabeth come up and talk about this movement, which is really cool.
Thank you, Melissa. Elizabeth Davis, thanks for letting me speak tonight. So yes, I know this teacher that she teaches kindergartners, and last year, you know, they talk about kindness every year, but last year they just got really motivated in their class that they wanted to see more kindness and show more acts of kindness. And it just grew from there, not just in their classroom, their school, their community, and everywhere else. And they really did. You know, we have the peace sign, we've got hearts for love, we've got, you know, the smiley face. These are all universal symbols. So their goal is to really make this not even just a national symbol, but a universal symbol for kindness, because we need more kindness. I had wanted to bring this to Melissa's attention a while ago, and then after the shootings, was it 3 weeks ago, it just didn't feel right. There was too much going on. So after, you know, these things have settled down some, we've gotten some, just had a little bit of time to deal with that. And also with all of the bitterness and hatred and discord that's occurred over almost the last year with our school board issues. It's just crazy. And so I just really thought this was the right time. So I met with her, and she didn't waste any time getting that. You know, we painted that Friday, and that was really awesome. And Barbara Wilcox, who is the teacher that is leading this campaign, she was so thrilled to see. Nobody else had even taken that much of a step. They've had several counties, several cities have resolutions or proclamations supporting it. We will be the first one outside of Florida to do it. So that's really special. And they have already sent this to Washington, D.C. So, you know, they're really working on it. There's a petition online that anyone can sign to help promote it. But this symbol, if you haven't seen it, on the building downtown, it is to show kindness all around, ongoing, never-ending, north, south, east, west, everywhere. So that is that. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, thanks for letting me speak.
And then there's writing next to it on the mural or whatever that you all did, right? Does it just say kindness all around, or was it, okay?
Because that's the official name of the
Okay.
symbol.
Elizabeth, thank you for bringing it to our attention. I think it's
Thank you.
outstanding.
Thank you.
And thanks for putting the sign on the door in such short order. Although you picked a good day to paint on Friday, though.
Yeah. So the thought is we wanted to do that for the Lions Club Festival, and we thought that it was neat that it was going to come before council on Monday. So it may not be up there permanently, but it could be refined and look a little more, you know, a little bigger and better than what we did on Friday. But there were like 5 of us, and we got out paintbrushes and we painted it in 2 hours, and it was really cool. So
Looks
So
good.
where is it?
it's on the old firehouse door downtown, in between Key and.
Oh, great, because I was thinking, okay, that was all white when I saw it the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking that would be a perfect spot to put it, and you
Yep.
already did it.
It's there. So I'd actually sent pictures and had talked to the kindergarten teacher, and she's been in touch with me, and she was really grateful and is going to show the map to her kids and show them where Bellbrook is, and I think it's really neat. So it's actually on change.org. They did a write up about us and what we did and what council is doing tonight. So it's just neat. It's just
Awesome.
feel good thing. So
Do you think, Leslie, maybe put a plaque there to read a little bit about the history?
yeah, we could do that. We could do that. I've already had somebody from the community ask that that is a painter that said, you know, if you want help refining that and making it bigger and better. I said, we'll take you up on that.
It's hard to make a circle when it's so big, though, right? I mean-
Well, and you should try to paint on a door that has
no
grooves
flat
that are about
surfaces.
2 inches
Yeah,
deep.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
tough.
Did you paint that on there, Melissa?
You got that right.
Yeah.
Did you paint that, Melissa?
I helped.
Okay.
The chief of police helped. Elizabeth was there. Melissa Jones helped. There were a couple other community members. Pamela Geltima, one of Thad Camp's. Yes, Misty, one of Thad Camp's all-state employees. She helped too. So there were a couple of people that stopped and picked up a brush and helped too. So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
I'm sorry I missed that.
Any more discussion on council?
You might have a gathering or something later on with that theme.
Yep.
It might go over well.
It's definitely my hope to promote it after council passes the resolution. So hopefully everybody votes yes.
Could we have a motion, please?
I have a motion to adopt resolution number 2019-X.
Get a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Mr. Greenwood to adopt Resolution 2019-X, a resolution designating the Kindness All Around symbol as the official symbol of kindness for Bellbrook, Ohio. This was seconded by Mr. McGill. Mr. Greenwood?
Yes.
Mr. McGill?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter?
Yes.
Mrs. Seeger Lawson?
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen?
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller?
Yes. We all heard the mayor say she looks forward to promoting this idea as soon as the motion passes, so we'll anxiously await. Next, we have resolution number 2019-Y. Mrs. Middlestetter.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to sign an agreement with the City of Xenia for prosecution services. Whereas Section 238.01 of the Bellbrook Municipal Code establishes the Office of Prosecuting Attorney for the City of Bellbrook and establishes conditions and qualifications for employment of the prosecuting attorney. And whereas the City of Bellbrook has negotiated an agreement with the City of Xenia to provide prosecution services, and whereas the agreement will be in effect for the period beginning November 1, 2019 and ending December 31, 2022. Now therefore, the City of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, that the city manager is hereby authorized to sign the attached agreement with the City of Xenia. Section 2, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith.
Okay, so I was approached by Xenia's new law director, Danette Fisher, and I was having trouble getting an agreement and really getting something in place, and Danette took it upon herself to come and meet with me. Our agreement, we had one in place previously, and it expired April 30th, and like I said, I was having trouble just getting this nailed down. We are still currently covered. We had paid up until the end of October, which is why this starts on November 1st. And the agreement is substantially the same as previous agreements with a 2% increase every year, which is what it had been in the past. So Danette was very willing and eager to work with us, and even told us that she was more than willing to take on the property maintenance and some of the other things that we hadn't gotten as great of a service with prosecution services in the past. So she said that she was more than willing to help, and she was also willing to help us on the legal front. If I have, small questions that I need, she was more than willing to help there too. So we had a really great conversation, and I look forward to working with her. Chief of Police has taken a look at the agreement, and he was fine with everything too. So nothing out of the ordinary from what has been approved before.
There's still going to be a lot of involvement with Ron Lewis.
No involvement with Ron Lewis, so
Okay.
He's moving on. He's going to be a judge, I believe.
correct.
Okay.
So he won't even be there.
No.
The term on the resolution says it starts November 1st, but the term on the contract says May 1st. don't know if that's something we need to change or.
Probably because the old contract ended April 30th, and yeah, the compensation for services part says November 1st. So yeah, we should probably, I can change the agreement.
Just update that.
Just on page 3, I don't know if it's met.
Just update that.
Yeah, I can do that. I can just change the agreement. Number 3, term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the only place where it says anything.
Yep.
Yep.
Date specific like that.
That, it was just odd because the agreement, the old agreement ended April 30th, and we've already paid our normal fee through the end of October, so it was
Yeah.
one of those odd things. So thank you for catching that. I'll make sure that all of that coincides.
Melissa, how much did we spend on this last year, do you know?
I would have to look, but I know that it's been a 2% increase, so whatever the annual amount is, this 15,918, it would be 2% less than that. I did check to make sure that it was only a 2% increase from one year to the next, and it was. So there wasn't a large increase this first year or anything. It did equate to a 2%
I mean,
increase.
I guess I'm asking what the legal services that they provide for us cost.
She just offered to,
So we haven't actually, so this is a new service then?
she just offered to, if we had any legal questions as it, pertained to anything that would be coming before them, that she would, be
Okay.
willing to answer and help us with those things. I mean, we do have an agreement with the law director, but that was just kind of one of those above and beyond things that she offered to assist us with if we needed it.
So our first path would be to our law director, and then here if we needed to, or if there was something?
No, here for prosecution.
Yeah, here.
Okay. Here for-
Yeah, if it was,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
if it was something that was related to something that was going to be coming before them, we could always ask. And if it was outside of, if it ended up being outside of a scope of something that she would feel comfortable giving us advice with, then we would obviously
Did we
pay
even
our
have
law
any
director.
prosecutions last year?
Pardon me?
Did we even have any prosecutions?
Yeah, there
Oh,
were.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
busy.
I don't know the exact
We don't know
number,
the
but-
cost though, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think what he's asking, same thing I would ask, you got the basic services is covered by the contract, and then there's some bells and whistles if we run into other issues. That they, what is it, $80 an hour extra?
Yes, if things were outside of the normal standard cut and dry. I mean, we could get a fairly large case that would be very involved where they would have to bring in extra resources, and we would have to pay for those. So yes,
And I would ask same, like, last year, did we have any of that stuff?
not that I'm aware of, not
Okay.
since
That's
I've
what I
been
wanted.
here,
That's,
no.
that's,
No,
Yeah, I don't think we've had.
not outside of the standard.
Yeah. We also shot price several years ago, and I think the closest competition was probably 25,000 for the contract quote we had with, it was Ron Lewis individually, then it went to Ron Lewis through City of Xenia. So it's been a good deal financially for the city. Steve McHugh is another attorney that we're referencing here. He handles all legislative matters. And then this Xenia arrangement is for all the prosecution of our fines, charges, and all that, criminal, et cetera.
I like this setup, and I'll tell you why, because the city of Xenia already has their courts and everything is set. And basically, we're just another potato in the pot, so it should work well.
Yeah. And I know last year, with Ron Lewis, our police department is very happy with them, and they're very happy with what's going on right now, so it's been kind of a win-win, and there's a lot of ways that I'm told sometimes they can cut and shortcut some legal process and reduce fees, and I think that Xenia is aware of that, and they follow those type procedures.
Yeah.
So. And again, on these matters that are prosecuted through Xenia, any fines charged basically pay for prosecution, and we don't get any net remittance to the city for any of this stuff. So. Any more discussion from council? That being the case, we have a motion for resolution 2019-Y.
Yes, I move that we approve resolution 2019-Y.
In a second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you.
A motion was made by Mrs. Middlestetter to adopt Resolution 2019-Y, a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign an agreement with the City of Xenia for prosecution services. This was seconded by Mrs. Seeger Lawson. Mrs. Middlestetter?
Yes.
Mrs. Seeger Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood?
Yes.
Mr. McGill?
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen?
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller?
Yes. Okay, closing out the alphabet, our next resolution is number 2019-Z. Mrs. Sigur Lawson, please.
Resolution number 2019-Z, a resolution authorizing the city manager to approve the participatory legislation for the State of Ohio Department of Transportation related to the Franklin Street Path Project, PI number 110612. Whereas the city of Bellbrook wishes to construct a shared use path in the south side of Franklin Street from just west of Little Sugar Creek Road to the alley west of West Street, along with construction of a mid-block crossing west of the alley. And whereas the city of Bellbrook wishes to collaborate with the Ohio Department of Transportation in order to complete the above described project. Now therefore, the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, the Bellbrook City Council does hereby authorize the city manager to approve the participatory legislation for the State of Ohio Department of Transportation for the construction of a shared use path on Franklin Street as described above, attached hereto as Exhibit A. Section 2, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith. So this is for the path, and it says the south side.
Yeah, so this is for the MVRPC Transportation Alternatives Grant that we got. So that project is fully administered by the Ohio Department of Transportation. So this is basically all of the communication that was given. The legislation itself is 3 pages, but I also attached the project agreement. It just outlines how the entire project will go, who's responsible for what. So, this just basically allows us to turn the project over to them to be able to facilitate the project, and it'll say that we will pay for our share of it. So it's standard legislation. We're not allowed to change any of the language at all, so we create our own resolution saying that I can sign off on the legislation in the exact format that they need. So the reason why we're doing this is the next resolution that's actually on the agenda is going to be a resolution that would authorize me to go ahead and start working with LJB on the preliminary design work. So the hope is, since ODOT knew that we were wanting to start with the preliminary design work early, since we aren't supposed to be awarded until fiscal year 2023, since we are trying to get this started and the project is relatively small in terms of funds, that we could, if we have all of the pieces in place early enough on, that there may be funding that goes unused in a earlier year that enables us to be able to get this project completed sooner. So this resolution and the next one tie in together to try to get this
So
thing moving.
We need this in order to get the pedestrian bridge, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, this is for I know we've got a couple of different path situations going on right now, projects. So this is for the Franklin Street project that was awarded through MVRPC, and this is adding the sidewalk on top of the bridge along with a curb, and it's gonna add that buffer and connect the sidewalk with the path that's already to the west that just kind of dumps out onto 725.
This is for public safety.
Correct.
Yes, okay.
And if I hear you right, you're saying by starting the design work early, if funds become available in an earlier year, we've got the design work done and you could press.
Ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yep.
Very good.
I just have a couple questions. Alley west of West Street, there's 4 alleys.
It's the alley that's next to the lawnmower shop.
I think they have numbers somewhere when they were.
This was actually the description that was in their legislation, so I just used it.
Okay.
But it is the one that's right next to the lawnmower
Well,
shop.
I knew that, if there's any confusion, they do have numbers.
I didn't know that they had.
In 1844 they did.
I will look up the number, just so I know.
I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but
Yeah, you are.
Good to know.
my other question is, some of the construction was, maybe that's the other one, 3 beams being replaced. Is there a reason for that, or?
Actually,
Yeah.
Dan Hoying is the
Oh,
engineer
okay.
that worked on the project, so he's here to talk about Little Sugar Creek Road also, but he knew that this was gonna be on the agenda, just in case there were technical questions. So that was strategic, putting those together tonight.
Isn't it neat?
So good evening. So the question about the 3 beams being replaced. Initially, our scope for the project, when we applied for funding through MVRPC, included the replacement of the outside 3 beams on the south side. And that was just to increase the strength of them to accommodate the additional concrete weight of the sidewalk and the curb going across them. When ODOT reviewed that application, it's their bridge. ODOT owns and maintains that structure. They actually requested that we leave the beams alone and add a concrete deck to the top of it. So it basically replaces the asphalt deck that's there and puts a concrete deck across the top of it. So there'll be 3 inches of concrete that's added to those beams instead. So those beams will actually remain as they are
Okay.
with a new 3-inch concrete overlay on top of them.
I was kind of hoping it would be widened a little bit.
Yeah, no. The plan is not to widen it.
Right.
But rather to use that striped out shoulder area that's on the south side, add a curb to provide the safety, and then put sidewalk and a new barrier on the back, on the extreme south edge. So that railing, that guardrail railing that's there will be replaced with a new, more aesthetic railing as well.
Will they have a better rendering of that, Melissa, at some point? Like, where you can
After
see the curb?
Preliminary design work is done, we would have a better rendering.
Okay.
Right now, we just have the overlay that was in the application, so
Okay,
it'll get refined.
okay.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome, thank you.
Any more discussion, comments from council?
This may not, I need to understand this. Eventually, we are going to need a left turn lane on 725 to Little Sugar Creek Road. We could actually use it now. Is doing this pedestrian walkway going to prohibit being able to put a left turn lane in on 725?
Oh, you're asking about a left turn lane headed eastbound
Heading eastbound?
to go northbound on Little Sugar Creek Road?
Yes.
The short answer to that is no, this project will not prohibit that.
Okay.
There is a small amount of curb work that is planned on the south side that is west of that intersection that may need to be replaced as part of that. But the longer answer to that is when that left turn lane is found to be warranted and the city decides to put it in, if that's a funded project or however you go about doing that, the sidewalk and other improvements would be necessary along that south side anyway to accommodate that space. So
Okay.
there's a minimal increase in cost likely to replace curb that we're going to construct with this project. But we feel that the curb is necessary in the interim to protect to provide for that safety, because as you're out there, that sidewalk as it comes up to the bridge really does come at a fairly sharp angle.
Yes.
And so we want that to be protected behind curb from the moment that you would cross, enter onto
Yeah.
that bridge, rather than have, an unprotected situation for that time. So we feel that the safety of the pedestrians is worth that little bit of curb investment up front that may need
Yeah.
to be moved in the event of that. Now,
That's
the
good.
larger question about when the timing of that left turn lane, traffic count data can be reviewed as part of the initial phasing of this. The construction of that is not included in this grant.
Right.
So if there were to be any construction for a left turn lane on that side of the street that's found to be warranted at this time and the city decides to move forward with it, it would very likely be at 100% city cost rather than at the grant funding that the rest of this project is.
I know it's not involved in this
Yep.
grant, but anybody who comes down 725 with the increased numbers of homes going in on, the traffic on Little Sugar Creek is just increasing.
Yep.
And I didn't want to see us put money into this project and then have a big problem putting a left turn lane. It's hard to put streets in anyway because we're so narrow. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Other questions?
Any other comments on council?
No.
That being the case, we have a motion for resolution 2019-Z.
I move that we approve resolution number 2019-Z.
Thank you. A second?
Have a second?
Thank you.
A motion was made by Mrs. Seeger Lawson to adopt Resolution 2019-Z, a resolution authorizing the city manager to approve the participatory legislation for the State of Ohio Department of Transportation related to the Franklin Street Path Project, PID number 110612, was seconded by Mr. Greenwood. Mrs. Seeger Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. McGill?
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter?
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen?
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes. All right, starting the alphabet over, next resolution is number 2019-AA. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 2019-AA, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with LJB Inc. for preliminary design engineering services for pedestrian improvements on the Franklin Street Bridge. Whereas the city of Bellbrook was awarded a grant through the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission's Transportation Alternatives Program for pedestrian improvements to the Franklin Street Bridge, and whereas LJB Inc. was retained to create and submit the application for the grant and has working knowledge of the project, and whereas the city of Bellbrook must complete preliminary design engineering in order to begin the project, and whereas the city of Bellbrook wishes to retain the services of LJB Inc. for preliminarily design engineering services through stage 1 related to the Franklin Street Bridge project in the amount of $35,680. And now, therefore, the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, that the city manager is hereby authorized to enter into an agreement with LJB Inc. for their services to an amount not to exceed $35,860 for stage 1 of the project. Section 2, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith.
So this is part 2 of the Franklin Street Bridge legislation for tonight. So this is just allowing the city to enter into an agreement with LJB to get that preliminary design work done. Like I said, this is the first step to being able to prepare us for being able to possibly be eligible for funding if it becomes available earlier than fiscal year 2023. So LJB, we worked with them like the resolution states for submission of the application, and they did all of the legwork on that and did a great job with that. So this is just getting us prepared for that next step. So, and just so that everybody knows, as part of the Transportation Alternatives Grant that we got, all of the engineering, preliminary engineering and engineering costs are are the city's responsibility. So this will have to be included in a supplemental appropriation because at the beginning of the year, we didn't know that we were getting the grant. Also didn't know that we were gonna be, doing the preliminary engineering work because we didn't even know that we were getting the grant. So this would come out of the streets fund, and so we've got the additional permissive tax money that's coming in this year that started July 1st when the gas tax came into effect. So the thought was to use some of that additional money that we'll have this year to be able to take care of this project that we hadn't anticipated.
Didn't we anticipate about 75,000 in gas tax this year incremental?
I think.
I thought that was kind of around the number where it was.
Yes.
We talked about it.
Yes. It was gonna be an extra 140,000 and it started July 1st, so
Right.
yes.
So this item is not in our budget right now.
No.
Right, correct.
Okay. Any discussion on resolution 2019-AA? Hearing none, can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2019 AA.
Thank you.
Second.
Darrell,
Second.
thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
A motion was made by Mr. Edwards to adopt Resolution 2019-AA, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with LJB Inc. for preliminary design engineering services for pedestrian improvements on the Franklin Street Bridge. This was seconded by Mr. McGill. Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. McGill?
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood?
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter?
Yes.
Mrs. Seeger Lawson?
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen?
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes. That concludes the resolutions for this evening. The next is the committee reports, starting with safety.
Thank you, Mayor.
Service.
This is,
Oh, I'm sorry.
wait a minute. Is it service?
I got it out of order. We can do service first if you want to.
It doesn't matter. I actually did have something to say.
I was going to include you.
I was kind of stunned.
That's why we're all fumbling up here. For the service department, they are gonna start their paving program, midweek this week, assuming the weather permitting. They're gonna be repaving Firebird, I believe it's Firebird Court, Dane Lane, Dane Court, Kim Court, Shadowwood Circle, Hillcrest Drive. And so they expect that it's gonna take 2 days to mill and 2 days to pave, but again, all that is weather permitting. So I just thought I'd let everybody know.
Thank you, and sorry for the oversight.
That's right.
Next is safety.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll give you a little update on the continuing saga of the tornado sirens. I spoke about this before. A week ago, Monday, 19 August, I attended a Sugar Creek Township normally scheduled meeting. The attendees were Barry Tiffany, Township Administrator, trustees Mike Pittman, Carolyn Desfani, and Nadine Daughtery, Fire Chief Jeff Lemming, and Police Chief Mike Brown. My purpose was to ask if they were interested in tornado sirens. I began with a statement that Bellbrook and Sugar Creek work together daily with our safety services in other areas when we can, and we are improving on that relationship. I then asked if there was any interest in tornado sirens. Like us, they have thought about them and are looking at what we and them have, which is HyperReach. We both have HyperReach. Mr. Tiffany said that he liked Code Red, and he remembers some good things about that. That's not being used now. It's a system kind of like HyperReach. Sugar Creek Fire Chief Jeff Lemming said tornado sirens were not effective. Our fire chief, he's not really on board with sirens. He also doesn't think they're effective. Also, some of the problems with tornado sirens are cost, of course, not all inclusive, doesn't have complete coverage unless you really put a lot of effort into them. Most people's nowadays, compared to 20, 30 years ago, most people keep their windows shut year-round, which cuts down on noise. Houses are better insulated, so it's hard to hear some kind of a siren. That's in Channel 7 a couple weeks ago, they did a report on tornado sirens in the city of Dayton. The city of Dayton does not have them for some of the reasons we discussed at the township, cost being one of the major ones, plus the ability for total coverage. So it doesn't look good for the tornado siren team, but when the tornado struck Memorial Day, I was asked why we did not have sirens, and my answer was cost and not effective as HyperReach. Cost is the main factor, because if they were cheap, we'd have them all over the place. I will continue to inquire and make a final report on my findings in the late fall. It's just something I like to kind of work at the ground level and talk with people and just get people's ideas on this particular subject, because if you've been around this area very long, tornadoes are kind of part of life at times. And close to us, they have done some serious damage. I remember the Xenia tornado in '74. And as a lot of things, we went from horses to cars, so sirens we may be at that point with sirens. And the HyperReach, if we continue with that, I would like to get a lot more information and get people, including myself, to understand what it's capable of doing, what it can't do. One of the things, I don't know if you can test it once you sign up. I don't know if you get any testing. I don't ever hear that. You don't get that. So I just want to find out what's the best way to go. And then the other thing too is, is my career with the military and the civil service and safety boils down to the individual. So there's a lot of things, if you're concerned about being alerted for tornadoes, there's weather radios, there's all kinds of apps for cell phones. There's a lot of things out there. And like I say, we do subscribe to HyperReach. So since it's a public service, I just want to make sure that we get our money's worth and make sure that people are fully aware of it. if that's the way we go. But I'm still looking into some things, so that's all I have.
Thank you, nice report. I would ask the city manager too, that maybe we make that hyper reach, how to connect part of our newsletter every time, so that if someone misses one of them, they can find the next one coming through, so we can make sure everyone's fully aware of it.
It was right on the mailer page this time, and it's
Right.
also right on our front homepage banner as soon as you go onto our website.
We
and
just
has
keep it on our
been.
newsletter someplace, don't have to be the front page, but I keep it
Yep.
someplace very prominent so we can see it.
Good idea.
Any more discussion?
I had one more thing on that.
Sure.
I went through and did a number of research items for the city with that, after we had the public meeting on that a couple weeks ago. And I agree with Forrest here, that the NOAA weather radios are really the mainstay that FEMA recommends for taking and having personnel in residences and businesses identified with severe weather that's there, as well as the HyperReach program. And then you get into this other factor that says that when you do have a siren that's used on an outdoor perspective, what does it mean? Does it mean that it's for tornado? Does it mean that it's for severe weather? Does it mean that it's for some other type of, public safety item? It's very confusing at that point. So most of the cities that do not have them have went to the HyperReach and/or the NOAA weather radio circulars that are published back around to the residents, so they know what those mean at that point. So, but we'll continue to look at that too. as
Okay,
well.
thank you. Nice comments. Anything else on safety?
That's all I have, sir.
Okay, thank you. Tonight's my last night to speak to finance and audit, and fittingly, nothing to report. Later on the agenda, we will designate new committee heads, and I will give up my chair of the finance committee. Community affairs.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We do have an opening on the planning board. I believe the opening has been posted. We snatched Dr. Van Veldhuizen from the planning board for council. So we now have an opening on the planning board, and once the closing date,
We're gonna leave it open. According to charter, it says 30 days.
it was 30 days. I
So-
wasn't sure what
Mhm.
day we posted it.
I'll have to
So-
look. So,
So that is posted for anyone who is
Yes.
interested.
Mhm.
I would say probably if people have put an application in for another position in the last year or so, there's no need to fill out a whole new thing. Just let us know that you're interested and we'll pull your application. And then we will hold interviews for that and assign a new member, appoint a new member to the planning board.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to old business. We have none. New business, tonight we have several items. First off is the Little Sugar Creek Road Study and Options Presentation. Something we've been anxiously awaiting and very much concerned about.
So, we had entered into an agreement with LJB to look at Little Sugar Creek, since we've had the slippage issues in the one spot that started in 2018, and so they had completed the study. I have a full report on my desk, which I had Dan Hoying, our engineer, provide a condensed version, which hits the high points, and then he's going to present that. So he is with us tonight, and everybody has a copy of that condensed report, and then we also had a couple extra in the back for anybody that wanted to take a look at it. So I'll
It'll be on the
turn it to him.
website as well, correct?
Correct, yes.
So anybody that wants to look at it, just pull up the website.
Yes.
Mr. Hoying, welcome again.
Thank you very much. Melissa, are you able to advance?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, great. And for recording purposes, if I go to the screen, is that okay? If I point to the screen, does that work, or do I need to stay here? I will stay here.
Yeah, probably
Stay
best.
here, and then if I need to
Sit
go
right
over
here.
just to point something out, I'll do that.
okay.
So,
The problem is the people at home can't see you pointing to this
yes, okay. So.
very easily.
Yep.
Okay.
I will do my best to describe it, and if we need to go to the screen, then I'll show you there and then come back. So So what I wanted to do to start with was just to provide an outline. Basically, the goal of the project was to evaluate alternatives for the structural reinforcement, meaning preventing future landslides, and then the addition of potential pedestrian facilities along that corridor. It's a 2,600 foot long start. We started, all along Little Sugar Creek Road. We started at Franklin Street, 725, and we extended that up past McGee Park up to the first intersection with sidewalks on it, which is Vineyard Way at the north end. And the idea there was if we are going to bring pedestrians that far, getting to the park is nice, but connecting to the residential network was also a goal. And so that's how we established the boundaries of that limit, and I'll show that on a map here in just a second. And we wanted to improve safety for pedestrians getting from those residential areas to downtown and from downtown to the park and vice versa. So those were really kind of the major objectives that we had from that standpoint. That map on the screen now has the area, the corridor highlighted in yellow from kind of start to finish. We focused and selected the location in red, which is the area of the 2019 landslide that came right to the edge of the pavement. For additional soil borings and geotechnical engineering, we had a firm by the name of Geotechnology come out as a subcontractor to us on this project, and they did 3 or 4 borings in that area and took bedrock elevation, depths, and materials to determine how that landslide is happening. If it was happening somewhere in the strata of the earth, or if it was happening down at the interface of the soil and the bedrock. And so they did those locations, and we focused that effort just at this spot, just at the area highlighted in red, which is the area of the current slide. We also collected limited field survey. We had our field surveyors out to collect things like driveway elevations. There's a couple of driveways along that west side. And so we collected those elevations in the event that we were going to be changing the roadway elevations. We wanted to understand what the impacts to private property may look like, so we focused our efforts there. And then used the GIS information to establish boundaries. So we did not go out and survey each property to know exactly where the right-of-way lines were to, that a fraction of an inch. Everything is done in the nearest foot or 2 foot basis based on the GIS, including the county contours, which give us the elevations that we used. And we used that to then roll into a base map that would allow us to develop alternatives so we could determine what this cross-section of the road would look like, what the plan view impacts may be, develop cross-sections at critical locations to determine wall heights or whatever other impacts may be necessary, with of course the goal being to get to construction cost estimates focused first and really looking at it in 2 phases. And I'll get to those 2 phases in just a second. When we got started in the alternatives, we did not want to rule out improvements on both sides of the road. Obviously the slides are happening on the east side, on the creek side of the road. We did not want to rule out making improvements, potentially an elevated path if we were going to look at sidewalks on the west side. But after looking at it and coordinating with our geotech firm, with the geotechnical recommendation that they're making for the stability of the road, all of those improvements are going to be done on the east side. And so it was just additional cost to also impact the west side of the road, and so we've kind of dismissed any improvements to the west side based on the topography. If you've driven it, you know that it goes up the hill very rapidly. In some cases, the toe of that slope comes right down on most of the pavement with very limited drainage on that side. If we were to have pedestrians on a sidewalk on that side of the road, because of the hill, it would be even more difficult to see them in certain spots, and so we didn't like the visibility problems that side offered. And then the cost of doing improvements on both sides, as I mentioned. So we kind of dismissed we didn't take the improvements on the west side any further into the study. Because we were not making roadway improvements on the west side, we then further kept the costs down as much as we could by keeping the road in its current location. So the center line of the road we expect to remain at its current location. We will also not expect to change the profile or the elevations of the pavement itself. So the road as you see it today would remain kind of as is, from the center line to the west at least. We wanted to develop a phased approach. There's a bit of a near emergency consideration for this 400, 300, or 400 foot section where the current slide is. The guardrails posts are not properly supported. That was the reason the cones went up, was that as the earth has fallen away from it, it's not performing as it was designed. And so we looked at that phase as phase 1. So throughout this presentation and in the report, if you were to look at the full report, phase one is that section that was in red on that initial slide, the area where there's the slide. But we also wanted to consider, let's not just do a Band-Aid fix there that would then have to be replaced or something else if and when that sidewalk connection were to be made, or if the full length of the road were to be improved. Because we were aware that in the spring of 2018, there were more slide locations where the pavement had actually settled and the city crews had made some repairs to that. So we were looking at a comprehensive plan for the corridor, but wanting to have a more ready, immediate phase one approach as well. The geotechnical report recommends what they call a pier and plug wall type. This is a picture of something that's similar on the screen right now. In the case of this location, almost all of that concrete that's exposed would be buried. So in effect, you drill a 3-foot hole in the earth and that goes 8 feet into the bedrock, and then you form up a reinforcing cage, steel reinforcing cage inside that 3-foot hole, and then you fill that 3-foot hole with concrete. And that comes up to the surface. And the idea is that in the strata and the location of the landslide is actually occurring between the soil interface with the bedrock. So it is not happening mid-slope, it's happening all the way down at the interface between the soil and the bedrock, which is anywhere from 11 to 15 feet in the ground. And so you're really trying to hold that entire hill, the entire embankment, everything above the bedrock in place. And so this wall type is what is used in Cincinnati on Columbia Parkway or on any of the other common landslide situations where you have that condition. So those walls are actually drilled about 8 feet. Their preliminary recommendation is to drill that 8 feet into the bedrock and set that 3-foot pier and pour concrete all the way up to the surface. And those are set at 4.5 feet on centers. And then in between, there's a small gap between those. You put a 2-foot sized hole that does not have reinforcing in it. And so it would look something like that if we were to be able to build it above and exposed from the earth. So that kind of gives you an idea of, first, the cost of this type of improvement, but also the reason is that you're trying to hold the earth and you need to use that 8-foot embedment in the bedrock to really hold it there. And yes, you may have a question?
Yeah, is this really something like they're doing in Miamisburg?
I am not aware.
What they did with the plugs that were built on top of one another?
I do not, I'm not familiar with the Miamisburg situation.
Okay,
I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
I can't offer that clarity.
But it wouldn't look like this, right? I mean, this is just showing us what is below the
Correct.
earth.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
If you were to go out there today and build this, and we'll show this in the sections when we look at it, all of that would occur below grade.
Below grade.
And on the surface, you would see a 3-foot concrete circle, and immediately next to it would be a 2-foot concrete circle, and then a 3-foot concrete circle. And you could put a cap on them, and we'll show that
Okay.
in the section. But that's basically the concrete, the recommendation on the wall. And so that is consistent throughout the alternatives. That is far and away their recommendation. Other materials or other methods are not as effective and are very costly. So that was a clear consistency throughout.
Do we need to do anything else with drainage? Because I know a lot of, like, the water comes off that hill, and I think for a while there, we thought maybe it was going under the pavement.
Yes.
But is there drainage, I'm sorry if I'm skipping ahead, but is there drainage solutions to this as well?
So we also had that same assumption that was going to be necessary. And if the slides were happening, my understanding from the geotech, I'm not a geotechnical engineer, but my understanding from their report is that if the slide were happening midway up the strata, if it was not happening at bedrock, if we were going to just try to hold the earth where it was, then water that comes down the hill and seeps underneath the roadway and comes through that hillside may in fact be contributing to that. But because it's happening as far down at the bedrock interface, this type of wall system is needed regardless. And so while there is likely water that's coming through, capturing it on the road surface isn't going to have any significant impact on what this wall would look like, and so it would just be additional cost.
Okay.
And so we've decided it isn't going to deliver enough value that at this point we're not planning to do any drainage improvements on the other side.
Okay.
At one point, foam was mentioned, they put foam in it, but that's not the case here.
That's correct. Those soil nail kind of applications or where you would drill in kind of at an angle, would also address if there's a midway up the strata slide. If there's a slip plane that's in the earth, then you would drill those foam in. But because it's happening all the way down on the bedrock, the entire thing slides. And so that's the,
That was before we knew where the slide was happening.
Yes.
When
So
that
you
was
so you
mentioned.
you stabilize it with these plugs,
yep.
okay, and keep it that way for, what's the longevity?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Most concrete structures have somewhere between 75 and 100 years, but that would be a generalization on my part and something I will follow up with our geotechnical engineer.
So basically, we got the worst-case scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, not a geotechnical engineer, so there may be worst-case scenarios out there, but when we got started on this, we were optimistic that there was potentially a soil stabilization that would not require these things, because the bedrock is between 11 and 15 feet, and you need to be 8 feet into the bedrock. It's a 19 to 23 foot tall concrete pillar that looks like that,
We're building a
all
dam.
buried.
So
you
at
know,
least we
below the
got the
soil.
good bedrock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So we're basically building a dam,
that's what this
an earthen,
kind
for-
of basic.
So
yes.
where's the water gonna go then? If this is all gonna be solid concrete?
Yeah, so I am not as sure on the details on that. That when you asked the question about drainage, it's my expectation that most of these most retaining wall systems have under drain functions that do in fact somehow get through there.
Let the water through.
With the case of it being a buried structure that they just drill, I really don't know the answer to that on how they address drainage of water coming through. I do expect that there is something, but without having trenches dug to that depth, I'm not sure how that is exactly handled. So we in the details of.
Is this system superior to a piling that would be driven?
That's what they tell me, yes. That this system, because I asked the same question, I said, well, so why are we not just driving a pile every
Yeah.
10 feet and putting
Yeah,
sheeting or
that's what I
something in front of it? And he said, from a strength standpoint and the need to hold the earth
Mhm.
up, this was the only really solution. He was very brief in his response to me on that. He said, no, this is the system that is used on, again, and he used through Columbia Parkway, and the slides in the Cincinnati area is a very similar example. Columbia Parkway's been in the news quite a bit this year, so.
This may not be something you can answer, but is there any way to determine, is this a new development over the last few years of the sliding of the earth over the bedrock, or has it been going on for the last 30? I mean, I guess.
So the only information I would have on that has been shared by the city staff on dumping materials, continuing to try to dump materials to
So that's been going on a while.
maintain that. I guess kind of the irony in that is that because it is slipping as far down, by doing that, you're really just adding additional weight on something that wants to move.
Yeah.
And so, we'd encourage you not to do that, but for the time being. So. Okay, so the wall type, the reason to cover the wall type is consistent again throughout each of the alternatives. And so at this point, we were really looking at how do we address the east side of the roadway with this wall that's being added and safety of the vehicles and consideration of a sidewalk. And so we've developed three alternatives. The first one, we've colored these exhibits a little bit. The yellow in all three is the pier and plug wall system we just described. In this alternative A, what you're seeing starting from the center of the road is really a 2-foot cut that we would need to make, and then we're going to add curb and gutter to address drainage on that side, because we do have this wall system at the surface, and we're going to add a sidewalk, so we want to put a curb in to provide that safety, the same as we talked about on 725. And so we've got the curb and gutter and the sidewalk, and because we don't have, at the current location of this wall, there's not room to put guardrail behind the sidewalk to hold vehicles, for the safety of the vehicles. The curb is not deemed to be sufficient to keep an errant vehicle in the road, even at 25 miles per hour. And so there needs to be a recovery area, and we're not able to provide that with the wall location that was detailed in the report. And so this is a concrete moment slab that basically serves as a concrete barrier that would be constructed across the top of it. It allows for the least impact to the slope, but it's very costly. You can see that from and I'll just use the total length of the section in our numbers. This is nearly a $9 million solution for that corridor. We assume that wall length is about 2,300 feet, But again, we've really only done geotechnical investigations in that 300 or 400 feet. So there's a lot of generalizations and assumptions that are included in this. The only thing I can offer you is that they were included consistently. Those generalizations are very consistent.
And that's like a 3-foot concrete wall, is that what you're
On the
saying?
back side of that, yes. The
Okay.
orange shape there is basically to indicate that that's the cap that goes on the wall. And then we have a 3-foot high barrier,
So
basically.
that sort of takes away from the aesthetics though of the.
Yes.
Because it is a pretty straight.
Yes. Yep. In an effort to reduce cost, we looked at basically maintaining what you have. So today you have an existing road that has a shoulder, there's no curb and gutter, there's no sidewalk, but you've got the guardrail along the east side of the road, and then this yellow diagram is again the wall location. And so in an immediate case, you could go out and construct the wall, do the pier conditions to stabilize the road. But this configuration would not allow for sidewalk. The wall is offset and the location of the barrier allows for that guardrail to deflect. Guardrail is designed to deflect some if struck by a vehicle. And so that's the purpose for the placement of the wall and the guardrail there. But again, alternative B is looked at as what's the kind of a minimal structural improvement at nearly $6.5 million, again, for the length. In this shorter section, in just under $1 million, $980,000. All of the construction cost estimates that are provided here have a 20% contingency in them. We were able to quantify, the wall height inside that 300-foot length. Or we have to make big assumptions on what the bedrock does and the elevations do on the other sections, and so we've just provided a 20% design contingency on that kind of throughout.
I know you said this alternative B doesn't include a sidewalk, but am I looking at this right? That this would be a guardrail, that's what that little
Yes.
block thing is, and then there would be some space before the wall pylon thing?
Yes, there would be.
But we wouldn't recommend anybody walking on that, even though they probably would?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. And I would say that we did not consider that factor. That a railing may be necessary behind a handrail, may be
Okay.
necessary behind there
Okay.
as well. And the hand railing option is included in the next option.
Okay.
When we had that. But yes, you're correct. At some point, someone would likely walk either behind or in front of the guardrail, whether it was provided concrete for it or not. Alternative C is a variation on alternative A that allows for us to avoid that rather expensive moment and concrete parapet basically on the back of the walk. And so you have the same curb and gutter with a 6.5-foot wide sidewalk that's immediately adjacent to it. And then the offset is provided to allow enough space for an errant vehicle to get up and actually recover itself. 8 feet is the number, the distance that's needed from the curb for that errant vehicle to recover itself. And then we did provide a railing on top of this slightly higher wall for the purposes of just expecting there will be people walking along there. We're providing a sidewalk to allow for that, and so just for the safety of the pedestrians is why the railing is attached. This cost is $7.25 million for the total, and is our recommended alternative. It accomplishes the goal of providing sidewalk, and so this is just a blow up of that same section. And some of the reasons for that recommendation, both A and C accommodate the sidewalk. C does require a little bit more of the clearing because the wall is set farther off the road, and so there is a little bit less of the wooded nature of the corridor. But as you mentioned, there is a 3-foot high concrete section, or 3 or 3.5 foot high concrete section in alternative A. So you can take that into account. Alternative C costs about 20% less than A, which was the primary reason that we were making that recommendation, and it is 10% more than B. So for the value of providing dedicated pedestrian accommodations, we've made the recommendation for C. It can still be, and as we mentioned in the phasing, alternative C can still be built in phases. And so we can talk about that. I've got that as my last slide here, is the next steps as we see them. If you're to proceed down this path to make these improvements, first you would want to determine which of those alternatives you all believe, the city believes, is the correct alternative. And then we would recommend, because of the largest component of this obviously is in that wall cost, we would recommend that you do geotechnical engineering for the length of the corridor. At least that 2,300 feet that is the area that's at risk for slides. As you get up by and past the park, you're much farther from the creek, and there's less likely, the terrain is much flatter, it's less likely that section is going to slide, because they're just so much farther away from the exposed slope. That would help us determine the limits of the wall construction, and from there you would have better cost numbers. And at that point, then we would say move into a final design where you would determine the elevations of everything. And so then as you pursue construction funding, you're able to break it off in pieces that are coordinated with each other, so that you know the elevations start to finish. And so you're not doing an improvement in the center that doesn't match whenever you come back and do the whole corridor. We talk about the funding or the phasing of that. If I go back to that section, unless if you go back to that one, we would not recommend building the sidewalk until the entire corridor has been done, because you would have a 300-foot, if you started with phase one, which is in the middle of the project, you'd have a 300 or 400-foot section of walk that really doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't connect to anything. And until you get all the way up to Vineyard, or at least until you get to McGee Park, there's really nothing along that limited along that side or along the roadway corridor for people to use. And so if you put the curb in, you will still have that flat spot. We would recommend that you grade it. People can walk on it as a grass shoulder, for the folks that are using it today. It's a wider, safer condition for them, but the construction of the sidewalk, at least at our recommendation, is not something that's necessary until you've got the ability to connect it from one end to the next. And so in our phasing recommendations, we say to grade for the sidewalk on that last slide. Grade for the sidewalk and construct the sidewalk as the final phase. So those are kind of the way we would recommend moving forward. I'm open, obviously, to any questions about what we did or other things that you may be thinking about.
If you move forward with the 2,600 foot, the geotech application there, how are those sections then connected? If we chunkatized it and put this first phase in, how would you then go to the next one and connect those two to make it whole and equal and equate it back to the original drawings here?
If I understand your question correctly, if we build the first 300-foot section of wall,
Yes,
how do you do the next
correct.
300 to 500? Each pier is independent of that next to it. So you could build one 3-foot section, and then in the next project you may come back with a 2-foot plug and a 3-foot. You just kind of pick up the same thing. They're not tied together, in really any way. So
each phase would sit by itself as you chunkatized it,
Correct.
the project, and put it in play.
Right.
Okay.
Now, we would recommend doing the curb and the guardrail and, or the curb and the drainage, the underneath drainage and those things all at the same time. And the primary reason for that is if you're adding curb, then you would need catch basins to collect the stormwater. And those pipes, we would run out through the face of the wall. And so those would be done, at 2 or 3 feet deep. We would run those pipes through the face of that wall, and that would want to be coordinated before you put this 3-foot cylinder in the earth, and then came back with a pipe to core through it. So that's the reason that we're recommending doing the curb, the gutter, the stormwater, the storm sewer, and the wall all at the same time.
Thank you.
And that, for that first 300 feet project, is the $1.1 million?
For alternative
For alternative
C,
C.
yes.
Okay.
That's an estimate. No. All in 2019 dollars. Obviously, we understand that this won't happen in 1 year, but not knowing that timeline, we've not applied any inflation factors or anything else to them. So keep those things in mind as well.
Looking at the end, I understand the logic of doing the sidewalk at the end, but the sidewalk you're talking about would run all the way from Franklin up to the vineyards?
Yes.
Okay, and is that, if we're looking at that, is that part of the comprehensive plan? Is that a key piece then in the linkage of downtown, at least up that far? Those?
And it solves a major safety issue right now. If you drive up Little Sugar Creek, especially when school's in session,
Yeah.
there are
Absolutely.
kids
Mhm.
constantly walking along the side of that, and it's not safe.
Understand.
What's the
And-
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I had one other question. At the beginning, you said you looked at the west side, going up to people's houses, and dismissed it from using that for the sidewalk or reinforcing, or there were no problems occurring there. I guess my question for you is, looking forward, all the trees there, they fall, the soil, what have you, did anything you look at indicate that we're gonna face problems there in the near future, the midterm, or did it appear solid, I guess, in your geotechnical, knowing that you're not a geotechnical
Yes.
engineer?
The geotech report did not provide any recommendations for the west side of the road. And they took, I believe they took one boring on the west side in that same vicinity. My recollection is, and I can dig it out of here at the end, one boring on the west side and 2 borings on the south side, or the east side,
Mhm.
at that slide location is I believe what they collected, and they did not make any recommendations regarding that west
Can I
side.
rephrase a bit on the recommend, I mean,
Sure.
I'm just wondering, did they see that, hey, looking at this, 30 years from now, you might have to be looking at a similar, I'm just saying, as you look at it now with the knowledge, does it indicate that, hey, years from now, there's gonna be a problem, or nobody asked that question?
No,
Okay.
the question was not specifically asked, but based on their recommendation and their discussion, it's my understanding they don't anticipate there to be any issues on that west side.
Okay.
Particularly if you make this improvement. We understand that the slide in 2018 affected some of the roadway base, and so you do have, it could encroach, but by stabilizing, basically building that dam, building that wall for the length, you're really holding all that material
There too.
up
Okay.
there. So.
Thank you.
I would think you'd have some problems with the trees, with all the exposed roots. I would think at some point, and that might not even affect the roadway, but at some point, they're gonna have to come out of there,
On that west side?
yeah.
Yeah,
There's
you
new
may
ones
very well be
growing.
correct, right. And I don't know if the city has had, that situation has existed, right, for some time. I'm not sure how much of that clearing work is needed to be done.
Well, since
I
the
don't know that.
development above it, it's gotten a lot worse quicker. And it's been quite a long time, they widened the road and cleaned it up. That kinda made it grow too, get worse,
Okay?
so,
There is limited drainage on that west side.
Yeah.
Catch basin or two.
I mean, that, probably need to look at that at some point.
But if you absolutely wanted to be sure, if you're saying you only did 4 or 5 borings right in that red area that was on the map, and you want to go you want to geotech the next side of it, it almost seems prudent to go back through and have them do a boring as you go further up towards the vineyards.
Yes, and when I say my recommendation is to do the geotechnical engineering for the whole corridor,
Yeah.
doing the soil borings and the analysis of what wall type to be recommended is what I meant by that.
Okay.
So, I'm not saying that you should do, first thing you do is go out and put these piers in the
Sure.
ground for this 300 feet. I would say first, or in the effort of developing that plan, take the additional soil borings on
Yes.
a set spacing. When ODOT does their soil borings, they do them at 400 feet on center, and that's on a flat, normal road. So my expectation would be that geotechnology on their recommendations would want them to be more frequent than that because of the really high cost of this. Anything they can do to recommend a different alternative or to help us estimate the wall height if the bedrock in fact goes up as you go
Yes.
up the hill. If it's only at 6 or 8 feet instead of at 11 to 15 feet, obviously you're saving quite a bit of cost.
Sure.
And would help with our estimates moving forward. So that's why we made that recommendation, is exactly your question.
Okay, thank you.
What's the current assessment of the road? Is Little Sugar Creek safe the way it is right now, absent another more slippage or more?
The
Movement.
concern that I have with Little Sugar Creek Road right now is the strength of the guardrail in the section of that 300-foot section. I don't have any concerns from what I've seen on the roadway base and its ability to support vehicles. If there were to be an errant vehicle that were to hit that section of roadway in the current
It'd be down the hill.
situation, it would give more than it's designed to give because a 1.5 or 2 feet of the backside of those posts are exposed. And so there's just some earth on the backside of those posts that are intended to be buried that is exposed. So that's really the limit of the concern that I've got.
So if we had any slippage, it would be slow, is that kind of what, it wouldn't be a sudden,
No, I don't know that I would say that. I think that the event that occurred in February of 19, I believe that happened in a single rain event, snow melt, rain event.
Yeah, rain event, yeah.
My pictures had snow on the ground, fresh snow on the ground when I was out there on the 6th. So it was, I don't believe that happened over a long period of time. I think it was in fact a single event. And that's what they found in the Columbia Parkway situation in Cincinnati. And I tie a lot of things back to that because one of the better mechanism to fund landslide repairs is the Ohio Public Works Commission's emergency funding. It's not a big pot of money. I believe recollection is it's $7 million for the state, but it is intended for a bridge that needs to be repaired immediately or needs to be closed or something. They used it and used a lot of it this spring in Cincinnati as Columbia Parkway was being done. And so it's a competitive process as an event happens. A city or an organization would apply for that. At this point, I don't think the roadway safety issue is not such that it would score very well because the roadway is still open, with some reinforcement of the guardrails. But if there were another event like what I understood happened in 2018, the value of having a plan together like this is that you could then take it and say, okay, we got a 300-foot section. The estimate for that is $1.1 million. This is our improvement. Let's get a contractor on board and have them do it. You can make the application, the next day, and as the emergency funding becomes available, you're better able to address that situation. So,
Is there anything to look for to see if something's happening, or is it just
So along those lines, we did have geotechnology at the time that they were doing their soil borings. They installed an inclinometer, a hollow tube that goes all the way to the bedrock, and they then can put an instrument in it to read the inclination of that tube. So they make an initial reading, and then they can monitor that over time to come back and make another reading. Quite frankly, they expected that the failures plane was going to be somewhere up in the strata, and in that case, the inclinometer was going to be a very useful tool. If anything was moving in the middle, you could see it. Because the slip plane is down on the bedrock, it's not as useful, and so they didn't take an initial reading. But when they go out and they do the inspection on that tube, there's been no movement that would pinch the tube or anything else down at the bedrock level. And so they're fairly confident that from the time it was installed in April till now, there has not been any movement. Mm-hmm. The counter to that good news is that they wouldn't really expect there to be movement May through August because of just the soils aren't as saturated. And as the moisture gets down against that bedrock layer, that's when it gets slippery and the bedrock turns to clay and it slides. And so you see the slides in the spring months as you're getting snow melt and the much wetter season. True. So it's not unusual that they haven't noticed any movement, but they do now have a reading on the inclinometer, and as of I believe it was 3 weeks ago. And so any movement again in the spring or in the winter, if there are any concerns, they could go back out, and for a relatively nominal fee, they take a measurement. So,
is that hard to take a measurement?
no. Just really requires their technician. They're located, just their technician to come out and take the reading.
So right now, we have a sign up that says no trucks, and that means that the buses also try to avoid Little Sugar Creek. I guess should we still keep the sign up that says no trucks and keep the buses off of it, or is it good enough to open up for buses? One of my neighbors is a bus driver, and she said, it would really help the flow of traffic in the mornings on school days if the buses could drive on Little Sugar Creek. I'm just wondering if you would recommend we still keep the buses off of it, or is it good enough that we could allow the buses on it, or do you have any recommendations?
I guess I wasn't aware that it was posted no trucks for the time being. So in the moment, I'd want to give that a little more thought.
Okay.
But I will again take that question.
Okay.
Again, the risk is not in the pavement today, right? If we get a week of rain, or as those soils get saturated, then the risk goes up on the pavement. The risk is really just in if a vehicle were to errantly strike that guardrail, the guardrail may give more than it's supposed to. I do not expect that somebody's going to go down the hill. Right? The guardrail, the post not too far off of there should hold it, but especially at 25 miles per hour.
Okay.
But I would need to give that,
Okay.
I guess, a little consideration.
We tried to do a phased approach. Any of the first phase would be what we would need cash-wise initially. I mean, is it gonna be $1 million rather than shooter if we start off with a couple $100,000 to? I mean, the first part, we're gonna have to continue the testing, whatever that is, it is. But then the second part, if we wanna start, putting some of the wall or building pieces of the wall, I mean, what kind of a chunk will we have to start off with, $1 million or?
So that would be my estimate today.
Okay.
It would be a 300-foot section for phase one.
That $1 million.
With
Okay.
minimal savings and not building the sidewalk that's included in these numbers that were kind of at the bottom of the slide as we went through them.
So to get in the game, we need $1 million.
Yes.
Okay.
That's an easy, short way of saying that. And again, there may be, so a part of the plan here is to identify how to fund that, where the money can come from, what the city's annual local match to that may be. So discussions that we have planned would be with the Ohio Public Works Commission, the local folks here in the county as far as prioritizing projects and how and where that fits into the risk standpoint. The geotechnical information will help these numbers get more real so that everyone involved can kind of understand to get from Franklin to Vineyard to make the ideal ultimate connection. How much are we really talking about? Or to look at the 2,300 foot section of wall length. What is the more accurate cost of that, other than just taking 300 feet and multiplying it times the length? So.
Right. Very good.
Thank you.
Any more comments,
Very good.
discussion of council?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for the report, and I appreciate the detail. It's a lot to swallow, and let us go back to work and find what we can do for funding, and I guess that's our next step, Melissa, to see where we go from here and kind of move on that way.
Getting, as Dan said, I think that the next step that makes the most sense is to get the borings across the length, because like
Yep.
he said, if we've got bedrock at 15 feet versus 5 feet, that affects the cost greatly. And we don't know what that's gonna look like the entire stretch of the road, or even that 300 feet, because there were only 2 borings taken. So
Okay.
there could be, somewhere where the bedrock really dives off or it comes back up, we're just not sure.
Is that part of our permissive use road tax?
Yes.
Shore Creek?
Mhm.
But that's not much money, though. It's kind of,
Not $1 million. But yes, it is.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if
Make a
if
toll
I
road
can,
out of
Mayor, I might suggest that, just the fact we're looking at this, that this study be provided to the planning board, only because they're beginning to wrestle with an easement and walking path, and down below this, issues with that, just to know that this is even being looked at as an option might help in their decision-making.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Good point.
I'll actually have this exact report, I'll put it online, and then we can make sure that that's brought to their attention.
Melissa, I think going forward, I think the next step is to see what we can do for revenue sources and funding. Obviously, $1 million is a lot. We've got a few big projects on the horizon in the capital budget, but I'd hate to have to see those things get pushed back forever, and I think the biggest item we have is probably a fire truck, I think. And that's in a couple of years, that's $600,000, so.
So just getting a good estimate for what the borings are gonna cost for capital budget for next year would be the first step, and then once we understand and we can get better numbers, then we can try to look at the overall funding.
Okay. Very good. Okay, next item under new business, Rick Clemens lot request. Is Rick here? or- Rick Clemens is not, is the representative here. Okay, we'll have to put that one on the table. Next item is selection of the deputy mayor. And as we talked about before in our ordinance, we cannot select a deputy mayor until we have a full council, so tonight's actually the first night that we do have a full council. So with that, I'll let Pam conduct the discussion.
All right.
Fair enough, or?
Sure. So now that we have a full council in place, we need to select, you need to select who you would like to serve as deputy mayor. The role of deputy mayor, the most important function is if the mayor is not available to preside, the deputy mayor steps in and presides over official business. And, could end up being mayor if things turn out that way, the way the charter reads now, that.
And as our
that's-
charter reads too, it's very important to realize that if you would step up to fill that position, you would become the mayor until that term would expire. Once you take the oath and become the mayor, regardless of having years remaining on your council seat, you would forego those years.
So,
So
and-
then, at my point, my situation, I have to either run in November, or I'm gone by December 31, even though my council seat had 2 years left on it. But it's because we don't have a situation where we appoint an interim mayor, we go right to becoming mayor. And they say, once you take the oath and become the mayor, you're the mayor, and everything else is different.
And that
And-
may be something to change in the
Well-
charter the next time.
Oh, it
That-
should
but-
be, absolutely.
Okay, I have an item of business, and that's, we'll discuss that then. So,
Okay.
let's do deputy mayor. So if there's a member of council that is interested in becoming the deputy mayor, if you possibly let other members know, we would need a motion to appoint someone to that position.
Do we have to do it tonight, or we can?
I mean, we don't have to do it tonight. If you know, you want to take time and think about that, and then we can come back and we can do that at the next meeting. We can definitely do that.
I think
We
so.
can do it next meeting, that would be
At
better.
the
That
next
way
meeting?
people can prepare, I don't know. I
Okay,
just wasn't-
all right.
And then it's done by silent ballot, or private ballot, secret ballot?
Yes, so what you would do is someone, well, not necessarily. I mean, if someone just wants
Do we
to
give
make a
speeches about why we should be
motion.
the deputy mayor?
I mean, if you want.
If you have a volunteer and there's nobody else.
Right, it depends on if there's more than one person that's interested, and we can look at that right now. If you all could just think about whether you're interested in the position, and then, we can look at that. And, maybe if you are interested, let me know, and we can, you know, so I can let the rest of the council know who is interested in that position. So that you would know coming in who all has an interest.
Okay,
Does that
very
make-
good. Yeah.
Okay.
Sound good to everybody?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good, thanks. Next item is standing committee designations. Each member of council sits on, I believe, 3 committees.
Well, there are 4 committees. So with the number of members that we have, yeah, it works out that you end up being on 2. Like, Mayor Schweller was the chair of the Finance/Audit Committee, and he was also on the Service Committee. So, since he can no longer have that position, that does open that up. Dr. Van Veldhuizen, you know, doesn't have to take over those actual openings if people wanted to switch around. This is a chance for you to maybe, if you had an interest in one of the other committees that you wanted to maybe take over, since there's now a finance opening, but you weren't on that before. If you'd like that position, speak up.
I thought we did this like an executive session before, where we talked about,
Did you?
hey,
Yeah, we did.
you know,
We
how
talked
often are
about-
those
yeah.
meetings, and what do you
We
want
went through
to,
this
and-
in January when we had the new
Okay.
mayor election, so we would do that probably this year in January, but tonight's a little bit different since we
Right,
got the
since-
current opening, so.
And really, since there's gonna be an election, and so January 1, again, we're gonna have new, you know, a new
Right.
elected term of people. This will all be rediscussed at that point. So these are really interim.
Interim.
From now until the end of the year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's not permanent at this
And we-
point.
And we could talk about this and do it later at our next
We
meeting. if
can.
need be.
So
There's
if
no
you all-
pressing
yeah.
legislation that requires it to be in place
No.
for tonight.
So,
I'll just say if I can, I'm painfully aware there's empty boxes and I'm the new guy. So, I'm happy to have a couple boxes filled
Okay.
and take my share of the load.
Let's think about it, let's finalize next week if everybody wants to, in case someone else wants to switch committee, but I appreciate your input, thank you.
all right.
Ne-
Next item.
Next item is clerk of council suggestions.
Me, so I do have 2, and one does have to do with charter amendments. So we're not due for a charter review until 2023. So with that being the case, there are items that come up as time goes on and we kind of see how things have happened, especially like with the resignation of our mayor and you know, discovering how that whole situation worked out, that could be something we would want to look at without waiting until 2023. If you'd like for staff to put together an amendment possibilities, that would definitely be one. The whole deputy mayor, we think being becoming an acting mayor versus automatically having no choice in becoming mayor at that point. So there's a couple of things like that, and how the vacancy filling process happens. There's a couple of things that.
So are you talking about changing the charter then?
Just making a couple of amendments to those
can
parts
we-
that were unclear.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's just to clarify things that weren't spelled out clearly in the charter, because we actually had to take quite a few items to our legal counsel because it was not stated clearly in the charter.
As long as we can do that because charter changes are general election stuff.
Yes,
So as long
correct.
as we can't,
Yeah,
as long
well,
as we can
we're
legally
not,
make
yeah.
some changes.
We're not looking
we
at
can
changing the
clarify.
term limits
Okay.
or any of those things. These would be things that are
Administrative.
mainly clarifying.
Yeah, yeah. I would suggest that maybe staff makes a rough draft of some language alternatives,
Okay.
submit it back to council, and
Okay.
have us take a look at that.
And again, this year with Bob's resignation in June, we're in a situation we had not been in before, so it's kind of some uncharted territory. And I know that Pam and Melissa had to go back to legal counsel on a couple different matters to try to get clarification. And sometimes we've got more than one attorney weighing in on what the matter was, because just things that were not contemplated, now we're in that situation. We're trying to go back and make some clarifications so there'll be less confusion going forward.
Yeah, it wouldn't be any kind of changes that would be something that would require a vote at this point in time. It would be mainly clarifying the wording, how things were stated
How the
in that.
process goes.
I think
Yeah.
some of the confusion was between the Board of Elections on some of the
Yes.
positions. And that's something, we can't change that. So we need to follow, whatever we come up with should follow whatever
Yeah, it was because our charter states some things differently than the Ohio Revised Code
Right.
did. So,
so we need to start there and then,
right,
And we have a legal opinion right now.
Yes.
As to how it should go. So possibly we should take that legal opinion, have staff look that over, make some, draft language and bring it back to us, have us look at it.
And the second item is, it's not really a change or anything, but sometimes some of the legislation that you all have to read out loud in full can get quite long and wordy, and actually it does say in our charter, in the municipal, not in the charter, but in the municipal code, it does say that ordinances may be introduced by reading of the title and a synopsis only. We wouldn't have to go through the reading of the line by line, as long as it's been published
Sure.
according to charter rules on public notice. If council would like to start doing that instead of having to read out line by line.
I think that probably makes sense for some things, but I
Yes.
think, I kind of like the transparency of actually reading what it is, though,
Yes.
because
I
that
do
way
too.
everybody
I agree.
will understand what it is.
leave it alone.
It may be worthwhile to make the change so we can elect when to apply it.
It
If we
seems-
get something
It
that's
seems like when we
incredibly
have
long.
like the budget stuff, when we have all those line items and all these dollars, and that gets very
Yeah,
cumbersome
it
to
does.
read.
So it can say here that things can be read unless council wants to waive that reading. So we can do it where, we say in general, you're gonna read it, but if there is a particularly cumbersome legislation that someone can make a motion to
Wait,
waive that full reading. Okay.
We've kind of been doing that anyway on, like you say, the budget stuff, you know.
There's a lot of them, we just read the highlights, so
Yeah.
we probably should just make sure that we have it in the ordinances, so we're covered by what we do, and we'll probably still
Exactly.
read the bulk of it, because everybody likes to read, they like to be in front of the camera and all that, so.
Exactly.
Get to see the top of our heads.
And that was all I had.
Okay, thank you, Pam, well done. This brings us to open discussion of council. Mr. Edwards?
Big number on Little Sugar Creek.
Yes.
And I just think at $7 million, I mean, for our audience members that don't know it, our budget for our entire year in the city is a little bit over 6.5. So we're talking about a huge expenditure that we're gonna have to be pretty creative to think about how we're gonna fund this. I mean, Little Sugar Creek's probably one of the prettiest roads in the Miami Valley. We want to preserve it as best we can, but it has to be safe. And, you know, it just blew me away when I saw those numbers this afternoon. So anyway, that's all I had.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the most facing challenges that we have in Bellbrook, I would say. I've been asked that question by a few people, and it is a challenge, but we're working the issue, and I think we can get it worked out. But until we find out exactly, you know, when they do some more tests, you come out with some more plans, exactly where we stand, it's still kind of iffy, you know, and I'm sure we got a contingency plan in place in case something does happen to the road with safety and ambulances and all that stuff. So we can work that issue, so keep that in mind. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. McGill?
I echo Councilman Edwards' concerns about the cost of Little Sugar Creek. But ultimately, you know, it's our responsibility to find a way to get it done, so we're gonna have to do that. More importantly, though, I'm pleased that we're moving forward with the 725 pedestrian pathway issues. That is a tremendous safety concern that I have had since the beginning of my term here with council. And now that we have that in place, the engineering report, you know, it's good to know we're moving forward with that. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa, also for your assistance on it.
Thank you. Ms. Millicent?
I don't have anything additional. I concur with what's been said, so nothing new.
I agree with what's been said too. Sugar Creek Township people also use that road, so I don't know if there's any way we can find some funding through Greene County or something like that, because it's a road that not just Bellbrook residents use, there's the surrounding communities use it as well, so I don't know if we can try and be creative with that. I don't know if there's any funding in Greene County that would help support that, but it seems like we should at least be exploring that.
The bulk of the increased traffic is Sugar Creek Township.
The other thing I was gonna do is, I think I misspoke last meeting, the first home game is not next week. The first game is next week, but it's at football game, but it's at Bethel Tate, which is down in Cincinnati, it's about an hour away. The very first home game is actually September 6th, and that is against Fairborn, and I understand we're doing a tailgate party again. So I think people really like that. Unfortunately, we had bad weather last year, but I think that was a really neat community event.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you, Donna. Dr. Van Heusen?
I'd just like to say thank you all for the chance to work with you, the appointment, and I look forward to working with you. And I sense I'm on the learning curve, and we'll start climbing.
Glad to have you here. Thank you. I was gonna just echo the same comments about Little Sugar Creek. I knew it was gonna cost millions. I didn't think it was gonna be 7 million. We'll just have to work through it and see what we can do to make things happen. Wish the citizens a very safe Labor Day holiday. This brings us to the official closure of summer, and now we're back into schools and full board for the school year. Anything else on council? At this point, we open the open discussion to by the audience. Please state your name and your address, and you're allowed 3 minutes.
So, I feel a little uncomfortable, but not because I'm here, it's because I had to put this thing on today. Michael Sabin, my wife Heather and I run, our business owners of Bellhop Cafe and a community coffee house, 26 Northwest Street here in Bellbrook. We also pastor Wings Christian Fellowship that meets in the cafe on Sunday mornings. We love serving here in the community. It's a great community. We just see so many positive things going on. One of the things that we are been able to do is we have the facility there to host a group called By Bellbrook, for Bellbrook, by Bellbrook, a group of about 18 to 24 plus people that come every Friday morning now from 8 to 9 that focus on revitalizing our community as well as kind of improving the economic climate for the business community networking group. So a couple of you have been there, but you're all invited anytime. It's a great group. Wanted to add a couple other quick things. Bellhop also hosts a group once a month. The Bellbrook Sugar Creek Optimist Club meets on the third Thursday of each month. So anyone in the community that's interested in finding a good opportunity to serve the community, we serve primarily working to improve things for our kids and our youth. One of the ways we do that is through a program that's the Avenue of Flags, and I think we're in our 5th year here in Bellbrook. We're serving, putting up just over 300 flags now, 5 times a year. This coming weekend is Labor Day, and we'll be putting the flags out. You'll start seeing them go out on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday over the Labor Day weekend. That's provided on a subscription basis, so if any members of the community, Bellbrook or Sugar Creek Township, would like to participate in that, we'd be happy to help get that worked out for you. Then the final thing I wanted to mention was the Second Saturday Street Fair is for September is coming up in 2 weeks, September 14th. A lot of things happening that day, but we'll have the street fair. It's from 4 to 8 p.m. Be 2 food trucks there and about a dozen or more vendors with crafts and so forth and some children's activities. One of the things that the Optimist Club does, we're planning our annual Honor Our Hometown Heroes event, and we'll be presenting awards honoring police and fire policeman and fire person in both Sugar Creek and Bellbrook, as well as a couple of veterans in our community that we feel are worthy of. And that will take place during the street fair at 6 p.m. The street fair is from 4 to 8. So I encourage everybody to come out for that. It's a great event for the community. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you feel better.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else from the audience care to address council during the open discussion? Going once, going twice? That brings us to the end of our agenda items for tonight's meeting. We do have an executive session for council to discuss personnel issues, specifically the discipline of city employee. And we'll go into executive session right now, and then at the conclusion of that, there will be no new business to come before this community. So thank you for attending tonight. Louis, thank you for the camera work. Can I have a motion for executive session, please?
Motion for executive session made.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Okay.